I'll take as many questions as you want to, but here's how I want to do it. I want gotcha questions. I want gotcha questions from a press corps to the virtual president of the United States, because I want to show you in real time what it's like when you have somebody who marries the message and the messenger together. So if we can take it that way, let's just start with you. Yes, sir.
We're seeing news reports about some petitions for secession taking place. I was wondering what you would say to those who are putting forward these petitions.
What would I say to the petitions for secession? Well, there's only one state in the Union that has a legal right to secede from the Union, and that's Texas. Yep. So anything else, in my opinion, is probably illegal, and if it's not illegal, it was certainly solved with the blood of the Civil War. The answer is not to pull states out of the Union. The answer is to use the genius of federalism, the idea that instead of it being one country, it's really 50 countries. The answer is to have tried one thing in Texas and something else in California, and then let the rest of the country look and see what happens. So you don't have to actually physically secede from the country. What you can do is you can say, because of the miracle of states, because of the miracle of federalism, let's find out what's working and what's not. We already know what's working and what's not. You don't have to actually leave the country. The country has left you. People will go where the jobs are. And the states that are going to be the reddest politically are the ones that are going to do the best economically, and the deepest blue ones are the ones that are failing the fastest. Anybody can see this, and it's immediately obvious. I think that's pretty clear. Next question, yes, sir. 1 second, one more, please.
Mr. President.
Mr. Virtual President.
Yeah, Mr. Virtual President. On the 911 this year, I know there's an investigation. You're looking into this, but where were you? What were you doing?
My fear of answering that question, honestly, is exceeded only by my fear of my First Lady. And I will say this, however. I will say this. When I was notified of what was going on, I immediately went to the Situation Room, and I gave our military command structure broad guidelines, and then I got out of their way. I stayed up for about 45 hours. I was awake until we knew that all of our people were either out or dead. And I cannot imagine a world where anybody who is responsible for other people's safety doesn't do that. If I owned a drugstore and I got a call from the police that somebody had broken into my drugstore, I'd be down at the drugstore. And certainly if I had people in that drugstore, I'd be down at the drugstore. So that's what happened. And we're taking a look at what we could have done better and what we could have done faster. But the President of the United States, I can assure you, is never out of immediate communication with the crisis response team, the National Command Authority. Once we knew what was going on, once the country knew what was going on, I knew about it within the next 5 or 6 minutes, something along those lines. Next question.
Mr. Whittle.
Yes, sir.
Nothing liberal press. I was curious. We have two questions. First one is this 30-point cloak of invisibility you mentioned in your last video. I'm hoping the workers are unionized. The second question is a little more policy-based. You've gained more seats in the Senate. We're curious, will you be looking at Mr. Reid to maybe pass a budget, or are you going to continue with the no-pass budget, keep shell that was put in place in 2009 game going on because of the do-nothing Senate? Is this the plan you're pushing?
Let's talk about the Senate first. As virtual President of the United States, I'm responsible for the executive branch of the government, and I have no power and I have no influence, no legal influence over the legislative branch. None.
As a leader of your party, sir.
As the leader of my party, I'm answering your question. I have no authority over the legislative branch. I am not supposed to have any authority over the legislative branch, and I don't want any authority over the legislative branch. The President is the executive. I think everybody understands how this works. So if there's a problem with the Senate, and there is a critical problem with the Senate, the solution to the problem of the Senate is for the people of the United States of America to decide whether or not they want a Senate that functions or not. I don't have any authority to make any different opinion on this. I have a little booklet here in my pocket. It's called the Constitution of the United States. It's really remarkable. It's very informative. It says exactly what I can do and what I cannot do. And talking about or influencing what happens in the Senate is one of the things that I cannot do. Now, my virtual vice president, Mr. Boring, is able to be breaking ties in the case where we have a 50-50 vote in the virtual Senate, but other than that, that is the limit of my authority. Needless to say, as the executive officer of the United States of America, I think this country deserves a budget. I think that's not too much to ask for the greatest people in the world. Next question. Yes, sir.
President Will, it seems to me that the southern border has been left open on purpose, and it also seems to the average American that the drones in the sky and the prep work that is afoot, you're either keeping us in anticipation of an event or keeping us frantic to start with. Can you speak to that?
Well, first I'll talk about the drones and then I'll talk about the border. You will recall that the very first thing I did as President of the United States was issue Executive Order 4942, which invalidated every single previous executive order of the United States. The only executive order I have ever issued or ever will issue was an executive order that voided every single prior executive order of the United States. Executive orders are tyranny. Executive orders have no place in a republic. There is nothing in the Constitution that talks about executive orders. And the entire idea of executive order is fiat. It's rule by fiat. It's a commandment. It's circumventing the Congress. So the only executive order that I passed was that, first of all previous executive orders were currently voided in their entirety legally. And secondly, I think it would be a really, really fine idea to make an amendment to the Constitution that says these things are illegal. You know what, actually, I take that back. I withdraw what I just said. You don't have to make an amendment to the Constitution. It's already there. The Constitution exists. It's not in the Constitution, so there are no executive orders. They're illegal. They're illegal on the face, whether a Republican issues one or a Democrat issues one. They're illegal on their face. If a policy is not worth putting past the people's representatives, then it does not deserve to take place in this country as I understand these documents. So that's the executive order issue, and the drone issue and the strikes issue. Now, to the border. We have the only unprotected border on the face of planet Earth. And people who have benefited from this unprotected border have told you for 50 years now that this is a sign of our moral advancement and the essential idea of America and what a swell people we are because we don't protect our own border. But let me say one thing about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is not just a slap in the face, but it is a spit in the eye of every legal immigrant who throughout the course of history and all around the world has stood in line and spent a fortune of their money, 10 years of their time, and waited to do the right thing to come to this country so that they could live here and become new people. E pluribus unum, out of many one. My grandfather came here from Great Britain in 1915, and if I'm standing next to a fellow whose grandfather came here from Mexico in 1915, it's a remarkable thought. My grandfather and his grandfather have more in common with each other than they do with the English people and the Mexican people they left behind. Because all of these people came here to become Americans. The great problem with this wave of, many problems with the wave of immigration, illegal immigration, is these people are not coming here to be Americans. This entire idea of La Raza and reconquering is not the sound of people who come here to be Americans. That's why people are so upset. But if your entire purpose for coming to America as an immigrant is to flee lawlessness, economic corruption, or political corruption, if your entire reason for coming here is to come to a land of law, does it make sense that the first thing you do is break the law? Aren't you bringing with you every bit of poison that you've been running away from this whole time? It simply doesn't make sense, and I will not tolerate it. We are going to have a protected border like every other country on the face of this earth. And we have always been a home to immigrants, and we will continue to be a home to immigrants. And when I say a home to immigrants, I mean people from all around the world, not just from Mexico. And I mean people who have ideas and intelligence and education and capital, not just people who can't read and write. We have room for them too. But I am talking about making America the place where every successful, hardworking person wants to come. And successful, hardworking, law-abiding people will go through the process. I am 100% behind rapidly streamlining legal immigration for immigrants from all around the world. I want the best minds on the planet. I want the hardest working people on the planet. And the only thing I would do if I had dictatorial powers is I'd make sure that for every new hardworking immigrant we took in, we got to expel a Berkeley law professor. Because then we would be in business. Next question, yes ma'am.
Mr. Virtual President, in 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini seized power in Iran and made life for women in Iran hell on earth. And it also birthed Hezbollah, the party of God. Now flash forward to today with the Middle East. And we see in Egypt, Tunisia, most of Northern Africa, Mali, Sudan, and other places we probably will be finding out from now, the same brand, but worse than the Ayatollah. What do you plan to do? Do you think that they are going to spawn something the opposite of Hezbollah, or the same, or worse?
That is a profoundly good and interesting question, and it deserves a philosophical rather than a political answer. Many people in America will have you believe that what Islam despises about America is its strength, its military power, its ability to put its footprint, its presence in the Middle East. That's utterly untrue. And the reason I know it's untrue is that I don't listen to useful idiots. I listen to what the Islamists say to themselves. They don't keep this a secret. None of them ever do, by the way. Adolf Hitler was never a secret about what he wanted to do. Mussolini, all these people are very straightforward. Islamists hate, what they hate about America is its licentiousness. What they hate about America is its depravity. And what they hate about America is they think we have a suicide wish and they want to help us along with it so they can come and take all of our stuff. Now, as a person dedicated to freedom, I am 100% behind the idea that an American citizen should be able to do or say whatever they darn well want to, but culturally, when we have people who will not stand up for what this country believes in, they are perfectly willing to believe that we don't believe in ourselves, and of course they believe that they can defeat us. So let me just say this about the Republic of Iran. In 1979, the Republic of Iran declared war on the United States, and it's been at war with the United States ever since then. Ever since then. And we, in order to show how morally superior we are and how wonderful we are, but really to cover our own cowardice to face this problem, have pretended like this isn't the case. Of the 4,000 people we lost in Iraq, most of them were killed by IEDs that were designed, constructed, built, or supplied by Iran. So, you've just beaten me to a policy announcement, which I was expecting to make later on this evening. As of tonight at midnight, I want to make myself perfectly clear. The next time that an American serviceman is killed by an IED or whatever type of device, and my intelligence services, the intelligence services of the United States can provide a very high level of assurance that this is a result of an Iranian bomb, then I will use my military powers as Commander-in-Chief to make sure that the Republic of Iran loses an installation. That may be a patrol boat, maybe a missile base, maybe an anti-aircraft site, but they will lose an installation. And for every American that's killed as a result of Iranian action, they're going to lose another installation. And if they launch a terrorist attack against American civilians at home, they will lose all of their installations. I will lay that nation naked before its enemies for 500 years. Because I am tasked with defending this society. It is my job to defend the American people. And how can I face the American people with the understanding that I command 12 carrier battle groups and we have fleets of bombers and air forces and I'm not willing to deploy them to defend our own people? Those days are over. Those days are over. We do not want to be at war with Iran. Iran is the most ancient civilization on the face of the earth. They are a magnificent culture. Those people deserve better than that. And as the president, or the virtual president of the United States of America, I would love to extend my hand to them, to welcome them to a world of trade and prosperity, and I believe they will come to that point. But I am telling you, the days of having our people murdered are over. They're over. And I would also say to the Iranian generals that when I say they are going to lose an installation for every American serviceman that is killed, one of those installations on our target list will be Iranian command and control headquarters. So think very wisely and very carefully. This will be a measured response to the degree that it is an installation for a life. It will be against military targets, not against civilians. And I deeply hope these people do not think I'm bluffing, because they are not going to want to deal with the consequences. I will not continue to lie down on the ground with the most powerful military force at our disposal and allow our people to be murdered like they have been for the last 40 years. In fact, well, as you know, my transcripts were made public on my website when I ran for virtual president. And if you go to my virtual presidency website, one of the tabs you'll see is reasons not to vote for Bill Whittle. And included on them are the fact that he's a college dropout from theater at the University of Florida, has a history of treatment for depression, and a long history of fast women and tax problems. Now, I put that out there because I treat the American people as adults, and I figure there must be somebody better than me for virtual president, but no one has stepped up yet. And the one thing I will say about Barack Obama is that if a person who handed out forms in Chicago can be president of the United States, the bar is set on the ground. Anybody can walk through it. What was the first part of your question?
What would you do in regards to recent negotiation where we renounce both?
The missile defense thing, that's the part I really wanted to deal with. In my opinion, in my reading of history, I can say this with some confidence, I think. I don't believe there is a braver people on the face of the earth than the Poles. In my opinion, they have the most magnificent courage of any group of people on the face of the earth. And when the Polish people decided to have a missile defense installation designed to protect them from Middle Eastern rogue states, but also from the former Soviet Union, which really isn't that former when you get right down to their policies, what they did was, they were people who lived in a shadow of a giant that stood over them their entire history, and they voted. They made a decision to ally themselves with people on the far side of the world because they thought they could count on us and they thought that they could depend on us to be a spokesperson for the things we claim to believe, which is freedom. And freedom means defense from totalitarianism and Russian aggression and Russian brutality, which has ruled their lives for centuries. That was one of the most courageous political decisions I've ever seen with my own eyes. And for the previous administration to sell those people out on the anniversary of the invasion of Poland by the Nazis, by the way. You'd know that if you read any history. But it was simply the most egregious sellout. I've never been more ashamed of myself as an American in my life, which is why immediately upon taking the oath of office, I reinstalled those missile systems. I have authorized the United States Defense Department to increase the number of Aegis-class destroyers, frigates, and cruisers because an Aegis-class destroyer using the Standard 3 missile is capable of missile defense. And to people who say that, well, this missile has a 50% kill ratio or a 25% kill ratio on an incoming warhead, I said, that's fine, I'll send 200 missiles with a 50% kill ratio. We're talking about defending this country. We don't spend this money for nothing. It is absolutely essential. And I want somebody to make the case how a purely defensive system is immoral. I want somebody to make the case how I am talking about a shield, not a sword. Make the case that there's something wrong with building a shield to protect ourselves from incoming nuclear warheads and the blackmail that ensues. You can't make that case. It was a criminal betrayal of the Polish people to do what we did to them, and I am doing my level best to restore their confidence, but it will not take just my administration. It's going to take 100 years to rebuild the breach of faith that we made with those magnificent people, which is why my first overseas visit was to Poland. Because I understand what these people have been through, and I understand the risk they took to stand beside us, and if we don't take care of our allies, we don't deserve allies. Next question. Yes, sir.
What would be your attitude towards Israel's right to defend itself against its enemy?
I saw a video, you may have seen these before, of an orca, a great white, a killer whale, pursuing seals. And the orcas would drive the seals up onto the beach. They'd give them nowhere to go, and the seals would go up on the beach, and then the orcas would just power up there and bite that seal in half. And I saw this one video where this orca did this. And it went right up on the beach, and the seal, and it clamped its jaws, and the seal was a few inches away. And just as the orca couldn't move any further, and the seal knew it was safe, that seal turned around and bit that orca on the nose. Now my question to you is, does anybody think that that seal didn't have a right to bite that killer whale on the nose? When you see wildlife pictures of lions going after gazelles in the African savannah, and you see them kicking and goring or using their horns, does anybody think that animal doesn't have a right to defend itself? It should simply lie on its back, show its neck to the lion, and allow itself to become somebody's dinner. Nobody for a second believes these things. It's so immediately obvious throughout all the world that the primary right of all people and cultures is the right to defend yourself. How can anybody say it's the job of the gazelle to be dinner for the lion? Nobody believes this. Everybody roots for the gazelle. So, how is it that the only Western country in the Middle East, the only place where the values that we propose are in place, is somehow the bad guy? There's only two places in the entire world, well, three, where Arabs can vote, well, two in the Middle East where Arabs can vote in free and fair elections. One of them is Israel, and the other, by the way, is Iraq. So, how is it that Israel is the bad guy? You know, you can clear all the politics and all the clutter away, but all you really need to know about the relationship of Israel to the Palestinians is this. If a Islamic suicide bomber detonates a vest in a square and kills 50 people, the survivors will be taken to an Israeli hospital, treated by Israeli doctors in the order of their severity, which means that the people who have just been murdered by these savages are now fighting to save the lives of the people that just tried to kill them, because of the ethics and the decency and the fundamental morality of the Israeli people. Now, I don't see how anybody can question this. I don't. It's utter mystery to me. But there it is. So somehow Israel's portrayed as being the bad guy, and everybody knows that they're not. It's just a game that we've been playing forever. We just agree to it. We agree to agree. But the one thing I will say is this. If you want to have a question, an actual question about who is the actual moral power in the Middle East, the Palestinians or the Israelis, every single piece of evidence you see shows that anytime the Palestinians have any operational capability at all, they deploy it against Israel. Same for Syria, same for Hezbollah. The second they have rockets, they launch them. The second they have the means to hurt the Israelis, they hurt them. Israel probably has, well, I happen, as virtual president, I happen to know the exact number, but it's in the ballpark of 300 nuclear weapons. Israel could absolutely vaporize every single one of its enemies overnight, completely secure its future and its success, and what, would they be demonized? They're demonized anyway. Israel has the ability to annihilate its enemies, and it doesn't. The instant Israel's enemies have any power to hurt Israel, they use it. I know what side I'm on. I'm on the side of decency, civilization, morality, and justice. And there's only one place in the Middle East where you see that, and that's the state of Israel. That's why I try my very best to repair the damage that was done by the previous administration. Any more questions?
Mr. President, now that you've been
Mr. Virtual President, I don't want the real president coming after me.
now that you've been elected, do you have more flexibility with Vladimir?
One of the great political statements, and I'm going to mangle it a little bit, is this. Alliances come and go, but national interests remain the same. At the end of the Cold War, the Russian Federation basically collapsed economically. We know what it looks like, and we see warning signs here, but that's a different story. Collapsed economically. It ceased to be a real threat to America, and for many years there was a world of cooperation with Russia. Unfortunately, Russia did not have anything like the moral or philosophical underpinnings that our country has, so they couldn't go from totalitarianism that goes back for 1,000 years into a representative democracy. They just didn't know how to do it. So they went from totalitarianism under socialism to a sort of a kleptocracy with mafia control and buying state industries. It's a mess. They're doing their best, and I don't mean to sound condescending in the slightest way. The Russian people are a great and magnificent people, very deep, very, very deep souls, deep into literature, music, and so on. But they have been so oppressed for so long, and the people who understood freedom and hard work have been eliminated for so long. They simply don't have the raw materials. They have to build themselves from scratch. I say all of that only to say this. With the rise of Vladimir Putin, who, let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, was a KGB mastermind. This man, if he did not authorize, he certainly without question authorized the murder of thousands of people. He very likely murdered several people by his own hand. There's some compelling evidence that he murdered this entire Polish government with a plane crash. I don't have the details of that just yet. But put that aside. The man has committed murder. There's no question about it. And I am supposed to pretend that this man is a friend of the United States of America, and his government, the people that put him in power, are supposed to be a friend of the United States. Not being a friend does not automatically make them an enemy. We'd like to cooperate with the Russians. We'd like to work with the Russians. And frankly, we'd like the Russians to behave themselves. But of all the stories I ever heard out of the Civil War, I'll give you one that means the most to me. When Ulysses S. Grant went into his first battle, it was a small battle, but he was leading a small group of guys, and he knew the Confederates were on the far end of this hill. And as he was taking his army up to come and deal with this Confederate army, Grant said his heart was in his throat. He could barely breathe. He was so terrified. He was absolutely terrified of the military might and the force that was waiting for him on the top of the hill. And when he crested that hill, he found out that the Confederates had pitched camp and took off. And Grant sat there in his autobiography. He said, I realized at that moment that those people were more afraid of me than I was of them, and I never forgot it. I never forgot it. So as far as going face to face with the Russians, I don't mean to antagonize anybody. It's not my job. America succeeds because we cooperate. We are a cooperative society. That's how we succeed. It's in our interest to cooperate with Russia. I'd love to cooperate with Russia. I'd love to sell them some of our oil. But if you think that I'm afraid of Russian military capacity, I respect their military capacity. I understand the limits of their military capacity. But if we ever both marched up that hill, I know which side's going to be decamping, and it's not going to be this one. Next question. Yes, sir. Are we getting bored? You know, I don't want to keep anybody. I'm having the time of my life.
What do we have to do to change?
Two more.
What do we have to do to change virtual to real? You got the answer. You got the message.
I had a long talk with Jeremy, who's one of the most brilliant men I know. Is my best friend I ever had, and he's the founder of Declaration Entertainment, which does the firewalls. We talked about doing this thing, and I actually thought about doing this last January. I thought about running the campaign concurrent with the real campaign, and Jeremy's wisdom was, don't pull any focus, don't do anything stupid. I thought we could get a block of people and make them vote, but he said, no, wait, and he's right. So we discussed this, and here's what I plan to do. I plan to run as virtual president. I'm going to try and get some real traction out of this. And I mean to be a virtual president for 2 years. If at the end of 2 years, after all of the skeletons in my closet are out there and all of this other stuff is out there, if I am seeing actual traction from people, I will think about running for real, not because I have any chance of being elected at all. But what I'm saying is, the reason you have to believe me here, okay? honest to God, I don't want the job. I don't want anything to do with politics. I want to make movies. I don't want this job. Somebody has to do it. And one of the most amazing breakthrough moments for me was, and again, we've had this conversation so many times, Jeremy and I and the rest of us. You think about the founding fathers as these titans, these magnificent creation of nobility. They're brewers, and they're lawyers, and they're farmers, and they're silversmiths, and some of them were smugglers. They must have said to themselves, my God, George has governors and nobles and earls and dukes, and we're just regular people. Surely somebody can solve this problem other than us. Comes a point when you realize, no, there is no one other than us. I'd like to run for virtual president until somebody better than me gets the job. That should be fairly straightforward. But, excuse me, that probably disqualified me right there. But, if after 2 years it turns out that in the real world this is getting traction from people who say you need to do this, I would think about campaigning in the real world, again, for one reason. It's a publicity stunt. But it's a publicity stunt for the values. It's a publicity stunt for the idea. It's not got anything to do with me. And if at the end of a run, so that I'm one of those people on the podium in 2016, showing these actually electable people how to do this, and if we can put together a virtual community of 4, 5, 6 million, 8 million people on Facebook or through 8 million people would have meant a Republican president today.
That's right.
Right? That is the limit of my ambition with this. I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it for fun because it's important. I love doing it. I think I'm having the time of my life tonight, but it's easy. People have said to me, how can you speak for an hour without a teleprompter and stuff? And it's like, it's simple.
Because you own it.
If you understand it and you believe it, then there's nothing to it.
Right.
Barack Obama doesn't understand it and he doesn't believe it. That's why he has to read everything. So that is the actual answer. We're going to do it as a lark for 2 years, and if it looks like it's getting actual real-world traction, then we will think about doing it. But I will say this. One thing I will do absolutely is the day before the election, whoever the leading candidate is, I am going to say, if anybody actually votes for me, I'm going to be deeply, deeply disappointed. Because this is about winning elections. It's not got anything to do with me. I'm happier than I ever thought I could be in this world. Can we do 2 more?
Yeah.
Okay, these 2 in the back, and then we'll call it a night, and then we'll come back and do it again. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. VP Phil.
You gotta be careful with VP, because I know that says for virtual president, but it also sounds like vice president, and I'm not going to demote myself.
Well, let me commend you on your election and you are
Thank you.
now and you came through a very tough time, especially with the press, so many endorsements from so many newspapers, and of course all the build-up through that. I'm amazed. How is it that you approach the press now? And from your campaign, I believe it was a campaign speech back in March, you mentioned something about the Department of Education, or at least addressing education. Now, have you softened on that? What's happening with the Department of Education at this point?
Okay, we'll talk about the Department of Education. As I say, I carry this little brown booklet around with me everywhere. It's the Constitution of the United States of America, plus the Declaration of Independence. Fewer pages than the owner's manual of a Toyota Camry. And yet it's managed to govern and free and liberate the greatest wealth creation engine in the world and 300 million of the most rambunctious people that ever got together in the same place. Now, this document clearly limits what I can do, what Congress can do, what the government can do, and where all of the other things belong. There is nothing in here that says Department of Education.
Yes!
It just doesn't exist. Now, people hear me say that and they'll say, well, you must be anti-education. On the contrary, education is the entire essence of our future. But if you, I don't have a graph handy, but I'm happy to have one prepared. If you have a graph that shows Department of Education spending and American high school test scores, you will find that for every increase in spending on the Department of Education, we lose intelligence. So the answer to your question is very simple. I don't have an agenda about the Department of Education. If the Department of Education was one of the powers outlined in the Constitution, then it would be my duty to defend it. But it doesn't exist there. That doesn't mean, by the way, when I talk about eliminating the Department of Education, for those people with a comprehension problem, that does not mean that I'm talking about nobody gets educated. What I'm talking about is putting education where it belongs, in the states. Why is that important? Not just the states, by the way. I'd like to push it all the way down to the local level. Because if we have a laboratory of 50 states and everybody's trying something different, some things are going to work better than others. We're able to say, well, like that works really well. Why don't we take part of this and work with that? No, actually, that actually exploded. That was terrible. Let's look at this. These people, who's got the highest test scores? Massachusetts, apparently. What are they doing right that California's doing wrong? What is the difference? Let's find out. This is how we learn things, and this is how we succeed, by competing against each other. And if you can make that argument with 50 states, how much of a better argument, how much more competition, how much could you learn, and how much faster could you evolve a real education program if instead of it being among 50 states, if it was done against 400,000 local communities, 400,000 local districts. When the federal government gets involved with something, it standardizes everything. It makes it uniform. It makes it monolithic, and it can't compete with itself anymore. And so we simply have to get rid of the Department of Education so that our kids can get an education. It's just that simple. Final question for the night, yes, sir.
Mr. Virtual President, I wanted to ask you about a possible inconsistency.
Possible inconsistency?
Yes. On the one hand, you said we have to get rid of the tri-corner hats and the muskets. People think it's a joke. But on the other hand, you said that we can't be ashamed of our own message. And so when you take away the historical anchoring of where our principles came from, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that it's lost credibility, but on the other hand, it seems like maybe there's some inconsistency. Can you talk about that?
Certainly. There's precisely no inconsistency. And you see inconsistency because as a member of the press corps, you have a cognitive disability. When I talk about values, I talk about values. I talk about philosophy and morality. I talk about ethics. I talk about virtue. These things are enshrined in our document and built into our culture. They're being eroded very quickly, but we're trying to stop that. The values are independent of the costume. And because the costume is connected to the values, people who don't understand the values just see the costume. And when they see the costume, they think this is a joke. I don't think it's a joke. Nobody reveres the Constitution and our founders more than I do. And by the way, I should just say in defense of tri-corner hats, that people like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington were the most stylishly, I'm sorry, not Abraham Lincoln, George Washington and the founders, these are the most stylishly dressed men on the planet. That may look archaic and old-fashioned to you now, but imagine a group of the brightest people in the world wearing Armani jackets and wearing $400 shoes. I mean, these are fantastically, brilliantly styled and elegant people. That's the way we need to think about our founders, you see? We gotta stop thinking about them as wearing waistcoats. We gotta start thinking about them as being swinging dudes who had the best ideas and they're wearing $1,000 suits and they are here. They're not back there, they're here. Likewise, the muskets. The musket was the most fatal weapon on the earth in its time. It looks like a toy now. What these guys should be doing is they should be wearing Armani suits with AR-15s slung over their shoulders, with target designators built into their headsets. That's who the founding fathers were. They weren't a bunch of cranky old men with archaic costumes and equipment. They were cutting-edge intellectuals. They were cutting edge of style. They were cutting edge of fashion. They were cutting edge of technology. They were cutting edge of weaponry. They were the trendsetters. They were the bleeding edge. And when we show people pictures from 250 years ago, they don't understand it. If I could make a movie, and if somebody would become a member of Declaration Entertainment, there's a world that maybe this movie gets made, I would tell the story of the founding fathers, and I would have somebody like George Clooney as George Washington, and I would tell, I know, as somebody like Gary Sinise. But I would tell the story of the founding, but instead of them doing it, I would have them do it I'd have them do it in the present, and I'd show these people for what they are. And this is a great final question for the night, because philosophically this is something we need to understand. If we continue to try to sell the American people on our values being behind us, we're never going to win again. We have to go forward to our traditions. Forward to our traditions. Because as I said, that founding document was the product of a first wave agrarian society. This monstrosity that we have in front of us now of a federal government is the product of a second wave industrial society. And the government of the future of a third wave information-based society will look much, much more like the first wave than the second, but it will not be identical to that. It's going to look different. But because it looks different doesn't mean it has to be worse. We could actually improve upon it, you know. I don't think there's much improvement to be done, but we have to stop this idea of taking people 250 years into the past. We have to have them understand that the future of America is a return to everything that made us rich, powerful, successful, and wonderful, and magical. And if you take the message, peel the messenger off of it. If you just take the message, our message is, leave us the hell alone. Let us do our own jobs and do our own lives. Let us go where we want to go when we want to go. Let us work hard and reap the benefits, or not work hard and not. If you want to sit around and smoke dope all day and have a job or something, then that's your business. But if you want to make something out of yourself, you should be allowed to. We believe in hot women, and we believe in fast cars, and we believe in guns and things that go bang. We have a military that can make anything on the world go away in 30 seconds. We have put our flag and our footprints on the freaking moon. That's our message. What's their message? Their message is human beings living in thatched huts, pulling fleas off of each other, eating their sustainable algae cakes, and having organic bake sales to raise money for the Guatemalan water snake. Is this really a contest of visions that we have here, or are we just screwing up the messenger so far? Thanks for coming, everybody.
Please, thank you very much, Bill.